When Chuk gets a call from a small village that they are being terrorized by a giant lizard-like creature, he finds it hard to believe at first. Only when he comes face to face with the animal does he realize it is real. Real and dangerous. He has to take action immediately and come up with a plan to capture it. But then, he still has no idea what he is actually dealing with. Hit! Chuk had managed to shoot the giant lizard-like creature with the tranquilizer, and now it was just a waiting game for it to kick in. And this did not take long, as soon after the injection, the creature started to slow down. When it had come to a complete stop, Chuk and some of the villagers wasted no time tying it up and loading it onto Chuk's truck. Only now were they able to get a good look at the creature and realize what it was they were dealing with. Chuk could barely believe it, but there was little doubt in his mind when looking at the head of the lizard. He never could have expected to find this here, or anywhere for that matter. But what is the giant lizard-like creature, and why was it such a shock to encounter it? Welcome to Wonderbot Animals. When Chuk first heard about the mysterious lizard, he was waiting to discover that it was all a joke or a case of mistaken identity. He wasn't sure why anyone would want to prank him in particular, but he decided to go along with it. That decision would change everything. At first, the description of the lizard made him think of a crocodile. However, knowing where the village was located, Chuk ruled it out. It was too dry there for a crocodile to venture that far and survive. The only logical conclusion is that it was an ordinary-sized lizard and someone was making up silly stories. Or was it? Chuk played along in the beginning and let the first caller tell him the whole story. He didn't take it seriously though, but once more and more people were begging him to help, he started to wonder if maybe he'd been wrong. There had to be something going on for so many of the villagers to be distressed. When things like that happened, Chuk almost wished that he had a competitor in the area. He ran the only reptile rescue and animal control service in the whole region. People would call about venomous snakes or pests, but he'd never had a call about a gigantic lizard before. It seemed impossible. He had to find out for himself. It would take several hours to reach the remote village. Many of the roads were unpaved or prone to dust storms. As Chuk started preparing to make the journey, he looked over his supplies in confusion. What was he supposed to pack to catch a huge lizard? He decided to take a little bit of everything just in case. As he drove, Chuk started to get a bit nervous about what he might find. If the villagers' descriptions of the lizard were true, he had no idea how he would handle the animal when he got there. He'd packed several pieces of heavy equipment, but as he continued deeper into the countryside, he wondered if maybe he should have brought more. Chuk was surprised by how overjoyed the villagers were to see him. It looked like practically everyone who lived there had come out to greet him as soon as he arrived. Even if the reports about the lizard were false, Chuk could see that the villagers believed they were in danger. That was his first warning. Once Chuk was settled, he started interviewing the villagers to gather information. The lizard had attacked last evening and disappeared with one of their goats. It had been doing the same thing every night for almost a week. They were convinced that the pattern would continue. Chuk would have a chance to see the creature sooner than he'd thought. If it was all a prank, Chuk decided it was a good one. The villagers looked terrified to even leave their houses. Some said it was like a dinosaur, while others compared it to a massive lizard. Either way, they all agreed that it was a nightmare come to life. But then, someone stepped forward with the last thing Chuk ever expected. The villagers had managed to take a few pictures. No one dared sneak up on it, so they were grainy and shot from a distance at night. But when Chuk studied them in great detail, he realized that there was one important clue that no one else had noticed. He couldn't believe his eyes. In the very corner of the picture, Chuk could just make out the image of a tire from one of the villagers' vehicles. That gave the picture enough perspective for Chuk to see how big the animal really was. He took deep breaths as he considered what he was facing. And then, Chuk had the worst thought of all. Chuk had no idea what he was going to do about the lizard-like monster. There was nothing in his vehicle that could handle a reptile of that size, He'd originally planned to capture it and then figure out what to do next, but that was off the table. It was too large. That left Chuk with a horrible decision. If he couldn't capture it and the lizard was eating livestock and threatening the village, then Chuk knew he would be justified in killing it, but he just couldn't bring himself to do that. He wanted to study the creature and find out more about it. In order to do that, he needed to catch the lizard alive. But how? Chuk was still working on a plan and talking with the villagers when suddenly there was a great commotion in the distance. It took Chuk a minute to realize it was the sound of screaming. The lookouts had spotted the lizard and were racing to the main village to take shelter. It was back. Some of the braver villagers brought Chuk to the outskirts of the village to observe the lizard. It liked to hunt at the outlying farms where there were fewer people and more livestock around. The creature was just preparing to vanish into the trees with a goat trapped in its jaws. Chuk took in every detail he could and came to a shocking conclusion. Chuk didn't know what it was. That baffled him because he'd made it his life's work to study reptiles. He'd rarely encountered a reptile that he didn't know on sight, and that didn't exactly apply to gigantic ones with unusual scales all over its back. Chuk only had one idea about what he could do to bring down such an unbelievable creature. For an animal like this, there wasn't a guide for Chuk to follow. He just had to trust his instincts. The only option he could see was to use tranquilizers to sedate the lizard so that he could load it into the cage built onto the bed of his truck. But there was a catch. He needed to find more tranquilizers before it came back. Luckily, Chuk knew all kinds of wildlife professionals in practically every region of the country. He called up some friends and worked out a deal to get as many tranquilizers as possible. Since he didn't know what would be effective, he was open to any concoction. It was a small fortune, but if it worked, the villagers would finally be able to sleep at night. But what if it failed? The villagers were clearly nervous about what would happen if Chuk's idea didn't work. They helped out in every possible way to make his plan successful. One team worked to strengthen the cage on the truck, while others repaired the fences to make sure the lizard would want to go into one particular area. Chuk only had one more thing to take care of before they were ready. Chuk called his employees at the reptile rescue and told them to get ready for the biggest lizard they could imagine. They would have to clear out an entire retreat to ensure the creature didn't escape or hurt any of the other animals. Chuk's employees wished him luck as he hung up. He would need it. It was starting to get dark. Chuk set up the tranquilizers and other equipment at the same farm on the edge of town. The lizard seemed to like hunting there, and the villagers had done their best to funnel the animal into the same spot to give Chuk the best shot. It would have to be perfect because if all he did was anger the lizard, Chuk had no idea what it might be capable of doing next. The sun had barely risen when the outsiders came. The usually quiet village streets echoed with unfamiliar voices and the soft hum of machinery. Tents were pitched in the village square, antennas erected, and vehicles parked haphazardly. The usual morning routines were interrupted as villagers paused to watch the newcomers set up, their eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. In the midst of the commotion, Chuk stood aloof, arms crossed. From his vantage point, he studied the newcomers, the journalists with their cameras and microphones, eager for a scoop, and the scientists with their specialized equipment, eyes bright with anticipation. Something nagged at Chuk, a feeling deep in his gut. Were they here to help or just exploit the villagers' situation for their own gain? Throughout the day, the village was abuzz with whispers. "Who are they?" one elderly villager asked. "What do they want with our creature?" another pondered. Many gathered in small groups, sharing their theories and concerns. The children listened with wide-eyed wonder, hanging on every word. The creature had always been the village's secret, and now outsiders were here, threatening to expose it. Chuk watched as the scientists set up their equipment near the water's edge, a place where the creature was often sighted. Their keen interest was evident, and it didn't sit well with him. "They're not here to study it," Chuk whispered to a friend. "They want to capture it." His suspicions grew as he overheard snippets of their conversations, plans to contain and transport the creature. The journalists weren't much better. They scoured the village, cornering villagers for interviews. "How do you feel about the creature?" one reporter asked a mother clutching her child. "Are you afraid?" asked another, thrusting a microphone in the face of an elderly man. The press only heightened the villagers' anxieties. They painted a picture of a village living in fear, awaiting the night's events. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Chuk gathered a few trusted villagers. They huddled in his home, maps spread out before them. "We need to guide the creature here," Chuk said, pointing to the farm. "Keep it away from them." They devised a plan, placing lanterns and making noises to deter the creature from the scientists and journalists. By nightfall, the villagers had assembled all they'd need for the ambush. Nets, ropes, and, most importantly, the tranquilizers Chuk had set up. He meticulously checked each dart, ensuring it was filled and ready. "We get one shot," he reminded the group. The air was thick with tension, but Chuk's determination was unwavering. They were the villagers' last line of defense. As the last rays of light faded, the village was bathed in an eerie darkness. The silence was punctuated by distant murmurs and the chirping of crickets. The outsiders' camp was lit up, creating an artificial glow. Villagers watched from their homes, the anticipation palpable. Every sound, every rustle of leaves sent hearts racing. Hours seemed to stretch on endlessly. Chuk and the villagers lay in wait, eyes trained on the farm's entrance. Every so often, a distant splash or an animal's cry would cause them to jump. The village held its collective breath, knowing that any moment now, the creature would appear. All their preparations, all their fears, came down to this. Past midnight, a shadow stirred at the water's edge. It moved stealthily, its form barely visible under the pale moonlight. As it crept closer, its silhouette became clearer, revealing scales and a long, sinuous tail. It was the creature. Chuk steadied his aim, heart pounding. The village's future rested on what would happen next. Chuk's hands were steady, but his heart pounded loudly in his chest. Every muscle in his body tensed as he fixed his gaze on the beast. The creature, unaware of its audience, prowled around the farm, its eyes reflecting the dim light. Taking a deep breath, Chuk positioned the tranquilizer gun, waiting for the perfect moment to release the dart. The dart soared through the air, landing with a soft thud on the creature's flank. All eyes were on it, waiting for a reaction. Moments passed, but the creature seemed unfazed. It continued its exploration, seemingly untouched by the tranquilizer's effect. The villagers exchanged worried glances, a collective dread setting in. Had the tranquilizer failed, the creature's demeanor changed suddenly. From curious to agitated, it began thrashing, its tail creating violent ripples. Villagers screamed, scrambling for safety. Amidst the chaos, journalists hurriedly adjusted their cameras, capturing every heart-stopping moment. The farm, once a place of strategy, had turned into a battlefield, with the creature at its center. With the creature rampaging, Chuk's mind raced. Another shot might be too risky, but doing nothing was no longer an option. Thoughts of the village, its safety, and the hopes of his fellow villagers filled his mind. Taking a deep breath, he reloaded the tranquilizer, whispering a silent prayer. This was it, the leap of faith. The second dart found its mark. The creature's thrashing slowed, its movements became sluggish, and its roars diminished to soft groans. With bated breath, the villagers watched as it slumped to the ground, subdued at last. Relief washed over Chuk and the assembled crowd. Immediate efforts were made to secure the creature, ensuring it posed no further threat. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the village was a stark contrast to the tranquil place it once was. The creature, now a captured spectacle, lay surrounded by a mesh of ropes and barriers. Villagers emerged from their homes, some in awe, others in concern. The capture of the creature promised change, and the village braced for what was to come. The scientists, with their white coats and clipboards, approached the creature with an air of excitement. They began taking measurements, noting down observations, and discussing their findings animatedly. Their preliminary assessment revealed the creature's unique anatomy and hints of its possible origin. But as they worked, the creature's heavy breathing reminded all of its vulnerability. Journalists swarmed the scene, each vying for the best angle, the most captivating shot. Flashbulbs popped, and reporters delivered live updates, painting a vivid picture for viewers worldwide. The once hidden creature was now a global sensation. Interviews with villagers, particularly Chuk, were in high demand, each media outlet wanting an exclusive scoop on the night's events. In the village hall, the council convened. Elders and influential villagers sat in a circle, discussing the night's events and their implications. Concerns were raised about the creature's future, its well-being, and the village's reputation. They deliberated on how to navigate the sudden spotlight while ensuring the village's traditions and values remained intact. As word of the creature's capture spread, visions of tourism, fame, and prosperity danced in the minds of some villagers. "Imagine the opportunities," one exclaimed. However, others cautioned restraint. "We must consider the safety of our people and the creature," an elder voiced. The village was at a crossroads, torn between the allure of profit and the responsibility of safety. In the village's bustling centre, Chuk stood firm, his voice resonating with conviction. "This creature is not a mere exhibit. We owe it respect and compassion," he implored. Recounting the previous night's events, he emphasized the responsibility they had to the animal, urging them to prioritize its well-being above all. The crowd listened, but the path ahead remained uncertain. Tensions simmered beneath the surface. Conversations in hushed tones filled the village streets. One faction believed in capitalizing on the creature's presence for fame and fortune. The other advocated for its protection and possibly releasing it back to its habitat. The village's unity was tested, with no clear consensus in sight. Dr. Elise Mitchell, a leading biologist, scribbled notes, captivated by the creature. Its physiology puzzled her. While it bore semblance to known species, there were undeniable anomalies. She pondered its origins, wondering about possible undiscovered habitats. But amidst her scientific curiosity, she also sensed the ethical dilemmas surrounding its captivity. Under the watchful eyes of guards, the creature lay sedated, its massive form rising and falling gently. However, occasional tremors and restless movements hinted at its stress. The surrounding barriers, lights, and constant human presence were alien to it, and its well-being became a growing concern. The team of scientists, led by Dr. Mitchell, embarked on a comprehensive examination. They collected tissue samples, tested its blood, and observed its behavior. Each discovery was a step closer to unraveling the mystery of the creature's existence. Yet, the deeper they delved, the more questions arose. In the makeshift media camp, journalists debated the story's narrative. "We need sensational headlines," one argued. Another retorted, "But at what cost? We must present the truth, not fan the flames of hysteria." The team grappled with their responsibility. Sensationalism versus ethical reporting. Unsatisfied with the fragmented information, Chuk embarked on a personal quest. Delving into old village archives, he searched for any references to the creature. He also liaised with some scientists, trying to understand its behavior. Chuk believed that the past held clues crucial to ensuring a harmonious future for both the creature and the village. By the fireside, elderly villagers recounted tales from yesteryears. "I remember when I was a child, seeing its shadow glide through the waters," one said. Another spoke of a haunting melody, often heard near the riverbank. These stories, passed down through generations, painted a picture of a creature deeply intertwined with the village's history. While analysing the samples, Dr. Mitchell stumbled upon a startling revelation. The creature's DNA showcased an unusual blend of genetic markers, hinting at its hybrid nature. This finding, if true, made the creature even rarer than previously thought, further intensifying the debates about its future. whispers of the creature's uniqueness reached the outside world, drawing more attention and visitors. Some saw an opportunity and others sensed danger. Rumours abounded, from government intervention to potential poachers. The village, once peaceful, now sat on the precipice of major upheaval, with the creature's fate hanging in the balance. Standing firm, Chuk confronted the leading scientists and journalists. "The village deserves to know," he asserted, his gaze unwavering. Memories of the previous days filled him with frustration. He demanded full transparency about their findings, putting the outsiders on notice. The air was thick with tension, the village's trust hanging by a thread. In a makeshift conference room, experts deliberated the creature's future. A specialized habitat away from prying eyes, one suggested. They discussed relocating the creature to a research facility equipped to study and care for it. The consensus leaned towards its safety, ensuring both the village's well-being and the creature's protection. Dawn broke as trucks and equipment gathered at the village perimeter. The mammoth task of transporting the creature commenced. With utmost care, the creature was gently moved while villagers watched in a mix of awe and apprehension. It was a journey fraught with risks, but hope prevailed that the creature would find a more suitable home. The research facility, with its state-of-the-art enclosures, awaited the creature's arrival. As it was released, it cautiously explored its surroundings. Over time, signs of distress faded. It began interacting with water features and showing curiosity about its new environment. Scientists and caretakers ensured it felt as natural and stress-free as possible. In the facility's lab, as DNA sequences flashed on screens, a groundbreaking revelation emerged. The creature was indeed a hybrid, a cross between a crocodile and a giant salamander. This discovery sent ripples across the scientific community, rewriting known taxonomy and reshaping understanding of species evolution. News channels buzzed with the latest findings. The village was abuzz with excitement and pride. Scientists marveled at the evolutionary implications, while debates ensued about nature's boundless mysteries. The revelation brought fame, but also intensified debates about ethics, conservation, and mankind's interference in nature. Lectures, forums, and discussions burgeoned, spotlighting the fragile balance of ecosystems. Nature has its reasons, its secrets, one ecologist stated during a symposium. The creature's existence prompted many to reflect on the perils of disturbing natural habitats and the unforeseen consequences it might entail. The once quiet village transformed. Tourists flocked, eager to learn and witness the creature's habitat. New infrastructure sprouted, and educational programs about conservation became a staple. The village, while thriving, also faced challenges in preserving its heritage amidst the wave of modernity. In the stillness of the night, Chuk sat by the riverbank, lost in thought. The tumultuous events had shaped him, teaching resilience, empathy, and the significance of coexistence. His connection to the creature and the village's collective journey would forever remain etched in his heart. Gazing into the horizon, the village and its inhabitants stood as a beacon of hope. The creature, now a symbol of nature's enigma, underscored the importance of understanding and respect. With concerted efforts, a harmonious future lay ahead, where both mankind and nature thrived in mutual respect and admiration.